We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked.
And complete the dang fence.
This bill that we will sign today is not a revolutionary bill.
Cast down your bucket where you are.
We come from France.
And I am, adamantly against illegal immigrants.
They're coming in by the thousands, just unbelievable.
A wall is an immorality.
Who are you rooting for?
Those masters of the universe are at it again.
You maniac! You blew it up!
Hello, and welcome to Parsing Immigration Policy, the podcast of the Center for Immigration Studies. I'm Jessica Vaughan. I'm the Director of Policy Studies at the Center and filling in for Mark Krikorian, our usual host. Our topic today is sanctuaries. First, should they be considered a credit risk? And secondly, which sanctuaries release the most criminal aliens back to the streets? Joining me today to discuss the first issue of credit ratings of sanctuaries is Ed Grebeck. Hi, Ed.
Hello, Jessica. I'm glad to be here.
Ed has spent more than 30 years working in the international credit markets, including senior roles at JP Morgan, GE Capital, and other firms. He has specialized in understanding risk in financial markets before it explodes in public view, including political risks. And so he's an ideal person to talk about whether sanctuary jurisdictions should be considered a credit risk. We know about public safety problems caused by sanctuaries, but Ed, what do you think? Do you consider sanctuaries to be a credit risk?
Oh, very much so, Jessica. When you look at the number of illegal aliens coming into the sanctuary cities, that's directly against the Constitution of the United States, not to mention the crimes and things that they commit as far as taking resources away from U.S. citizens in those jurisdictions. It's a major political risk.
Indeed. All right. So what would that have to do with their rating as a credit risk, their municipal bond rating, or anything having to do with how they finance big public projects?
Okay.
How does being considered a credit risk affect them, and how is that noted in financial markets?
Well, first of all, basically, the rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, Fitch, to an extent, Kroll, and about 4 or 5 others that rate munis, basically have the same methodology for rating all the munis. There's very little difference from one agency to the other in terms of credit rating. Most of their ratings basically are focused around the macro environment of that city or state and financial considerations. Macro being, okay, what are the main industries in that city? Is it automotive? Is it coal? Is it oil? And so on. What are the prospects for that going forward? Because that affects their ability to collect taxes and to service the debt on their bonds. And then after that, they go into different particular micro, let's say, focuses. Okay, what are that city's pension fund liabilities? How old is the workforce, et cetera, et cetera? How skilled is the workforce? And that impacts, according to their model, the ability to pay back principal and interest on time. However, there's virtually no recognition at any of the rating agencies about the political risk of the cities or states in the U.S. And that's where the problem comes in with respect to sanctuary cities. But before we go into that, you have to remember that almost, I'd say over 90% of cities and states in the U.S. are rated, let's say the rating is like AA, which is like the second highest in the rating scale. And that goes across through all the rating agencies that rate debt. And you start to think, if 90% of the people are rated AA, what does that really say about the model? What are they really missing here? Mm-hmm. And I think investors need to explore this more in detail, especially as regards political risk. Because I'll tell you now, they aren't considering any aspect of sanctuary cities as being a credit negative.
Interesting. Even though for some time they were considering issues like whether they thought a jurisdiction was prepared for climate change over the long term, or whether they were pursuing DEI initiatives, things like that, which arguably are political. They don't seem to be paying attention to the risk presented by what are really voluntary policies not to cooperate with immigration enforcement.
Exactly. That's one of my major complaints with the rating agencies. As a sidebar, they don't have a good record of anticipating the unexpected event. You can go back to like the late 1990s when there was the Far East Asia crisis in Asia, South Korea, Indonesia, Thailand, and all that, when they had rated them very well before the crash of like 98. And basically Moody's and S&P basically didn't accept any blame. I'll give one credit to Fitch there. They did for that crisis and said we should have gotten our models right. And then, you go back into the whole thing about the bond insurers in 2007, before the global financial crisis. That industry basically collapsed. And then everything else in terms of the securitization, we all know about the mortgages, the so-called collateralized debt obligations, and the whole alphabet soup of securitizations in that time. But the problem is you can't really model political risk as such. But I think the problem there also is the people who do the ratings for political risk, they basically come out of the same mold. They get their background from the latest mainstream media stories about political risk and the narratives, and they basically say, okay, well, this is not important, that is, with the result being that the rating agencies now have focused on ESG and DEI. They have all these climate change models that they say affect risk. They have all these DEI models where they fabricate numbers saying that, okay, well, there's a marginal benefit if people basically acknowledge climate change and DEI in their ratings. But I believe those models are fabricated for numbers to give them the result that they want. And that means that what they do is they're ignoring sanctuary cities. The thing is, with sanctuary cities, several hundreds, thousands of U.S. citizens have basically been killed or harmed by illegal aliens. In contrast, I can't think of anyone that has been killed or harmed by so-called man-made climate change. That's something that may or may not happen in 1,000 years. But sanctuary cities can be taken care of today, but it's ignored.
That's true. I mean, there are definitely people who are harmed because the local jail could not or would not hold a criminal alien that ICE had asked them to hold so that they could take them into custody for deportation. And instead, that person gets released and goes on to commit other crimes, sometimes, fatal crimes.
Yeah.
Or really serious crimes. We know that's happened 10,000 times in the last 10 years, according to ICE data.
If you can't control the borders and people's safety, what are you doing?
But isn't it also kind of a fiscal risk as well? I mean, when a community or municipal leaders or even state leaders, because some of these policies apply at the state level, such as in California, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts, they are essentially attracting illegal immigration. For example, if they're giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens or allowing illegal aliens to qualify for subsidized health care or welfare programs.
Yes.
Would it matter if they are increasing the burden on taxpayers? Is that something that the rating agencies look at?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
It's interesting what you said, that the rating agencies are basically subject to kind of the conventional wisdom or a particular narrative on immigration that could be contributing to their ignoring sanctuary policies as a governance risk.
Yes, that's quite correct. The people at the rating agencies, basically, when they look at political risk, they tend to take the conventional media approach to political risk, whatever that is. For example, they'll say, oh my God, climate change is a big risk. Well, we have to figure out what cities or countries or states are exposed most to climate change and adjust their rating accordingly, downgrade them or whatever. Same thing with DEI. The mainstream media until recently hasn't really given much attention to sanctuary cities, except in an apologetic sense. Well, we have to help these people. How can you turn them down? So that will be part of the, let's say, the ongoing thinking of like the rating agency analysts. They will basically not be geared up to evaluate the risk of sanctuary cities. But it's true that beyond, let's say, the safety of citizens, sanctuary jurisdictions do have challenges to their budgets just by hosting illegal aliens. New York City is a classic example of that.
That's true, which is where you're based.
Almost all the population growth of New York State in the last, say, 20 years, and I'm talking from a program I did a few years ago, the increase was basically due to illegal aliens, largely in New York City. And, it doesn't take long to go there when you step out of Grand Central and see the Roosevelt Hotel basically occupied by illegal aliens and several other hotels to realize what a problem this is.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So it strikes me that this is not just some kind of esoteric issue for people in financial markets and working in that particular industry, that people may not be aware that this may affect individual investors and possibly also might become potentially something to use as leverage against the sanctuaries. And I want to talk about both of those things. Let's start with how the lack of an objective rating, bond rating, or risk assessment on jurisdictions that have sanctuary policies is a disservice to investors. Can you explain that to our listeners?
It's quite a disservice to investors. I mean, you can see that basically places like Seattle and Portland, San Francisco, New York, we can go down the list, but they're rated like at least AA, if not AAA. And in contrast, there are other cities like presumably like in Texas and some of the western states where they are also rated AAA.
As if there were no difference.
They're basically ignoring the fact that the financial costs and the physical costs of illegal aliens are quite high. That is a big difference, and it sort of like allows investors to be comfortable and say, well, San Francisco is AAA, so is say your city in Texas or something like that. So I'm indifferent as to who I invest in. Now that is a simplification of the situation, because the state income taxes are not tax free if you're investing in a municipal bond from another state. But the point is, they're both rated AAA, and they should not be. There should be a differentiation.
And there probably should be a difference between, say, Jacksonville, Florida, most definitely not a sanctuary, and New York City or Chicago.
Yeah, there should be. They will back up and say, well, but New York and Chicago are bigger cities. They have a more diversified, economic base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, okay, that's true. But the point is, it should be a relative comparison. I mean, if you're talking about ignoring political risk, I feel once political risk hits a major threshold, as it's being done in all sanctuary cities, I think you'd be hard to even argue that it justifies an investment grade rating at its lowest level, which is BBB. I would think that there's a good case to be made that sanctuary cities should actually, from a credit perspective, be rated BB.
BB.
Yeah, the reason, non-investment grade, the reason for that is that you have basically the influx of illegal aliens who are eating up the tax base. You have the crimes that they're committing in the long run, or maybe even the medium run, maybe the short run even. A lot of people businesses will be exiting the city, the town, and all that stuff. And that's reflective of the political risk long term. I think there should be substantial, let's say, reductions in rating, certainly from like the AAA, AA rating, if not to like the highest level of non-investment grade.
So that would really get the attention of some of these municipal leaders, because right now they see a political value in sanctuary policies. That's why they have them. They don't adopt them for public safety reasons. The monies federal grants that they may or may not be debarred from as a result of their policy, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, but they may or may not face debarment from grants. And so they don't see any consequence, really. They don't care about the public safety consequences. Yeah. They're more interested in the political benefit. But if something like that were to cause an erosion in their credit rating, their bond rating, that really would be a blow to the municipality, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes, it would. And the reason is because right now there's no differentiation in in hardly any city rating or state rating. As I said, most of them, AA is probably the average rating across all rating agencies for municipalities. Whether they're sanctuaries or not, it doesn't matter. But once you start factoring political risk, then you have to start looking at these intangibles. Like, for example, what is the result of having illegal aliens in there economically and for physical safety? And basically not letting the federal government approach them and take them out. And that's a major concern politically. Mm-hmm. In that situation, if let's say there was a cost to such political risk of sanctuary cities, I think you'd see a reduction in value of the affected municipal bonds of the sanctuary cities. They could lose like 15%, 20% of their value on day one. As things were being worked out, there would be a lot more instability in the market, volatility in the bond market. And since municipal bonds don't trade that much anyway, the volatility will hit them harder in terms of the bid-ask spread. So there will be a lot of confusion amongst investors, and it could have all been avoided if the sanctuary cities would basically cooperate with the federal government.
And doesn't that bond rating also, at least in part, determine how much it costs for them to borrow money for municipal projects or civic projects?
It does.
Wouldn't it make it harder for them to get some of their priorities accomplished?
Yeah, the bond ratings, just a little bit of background. Like 40 years ago, when I was at Chase Manhattan going through their credit management program, they would have actually fired somebody if he would have said, well, I approved the loan to this company because Moody's rated it A. You'd never do that. But a lot of institutions these days are what I would call just buying on ratings. They might read the prospectus, might think about it a little bit, maybe do a memo, but then at the end of the day, they're going to say, well, I have nothing to lose here because Moody's rated this A, so we'll do it. That wouldn't have happened years ago. It happens far too much now. And that was one of the reasons for the credit crunch of 2008, 2009. So I think what the rating agencies will have to do, if they're serious about this, is rework their underwriting criteria for political risk. To
account for sanctuary policies. And there are objective ways that they could do that, especially because President Trump recently directed the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security to come up with a list of sanctuary jurisdictions. Yeah. We publish one based on our definition, based on ICE records and the actual policies that we review. It's not like this is some kind of, reading tarot cards or something.
Yeah. It's not some sort of off-the-wall idea. Yeah. What I'm looking at doing right now is pretty much formulating, it's very difficult to coalesce like all the independent sources on sanctuary city research, but I'm trying to identify particular sanctuary cities and pretty much the projects that they're funding, and to get an idea of which ones are at the greatest risk of all sanctuary cities. And in doing that, I hope to be able to educate investors as to which sanctuary city investments they should dispose of, or basically inform their asset managers that they don't want to actually invest in this group of of cities, which will basically be sanctuary cities anyway. I think that would help out the market a lot as well.
Oh, that's a great idea. I look forward to seeing that. But going back a ways, in 2017, during the first Trump administration, when he took steps to debar sanctuaries from certain kinds of federal funds, Standard & Poor's and Fitch said that this shouldn't affect ratings because the amount of money was small and there were going to be lawsuits that would block Trump from doing that. And I'm wondering if you think that these rating agencies are going to continue to poo-poo the threat, or if you think there's something different now about this renewed effort. I mean, I certainly see some differences, but I'm interested in what you think, if there are, some developments that might cause them to reconsider their view on this.
I don't think that they will consider their view unless a big event happens. Basically, remember the type of response that you said that you quoted that they had given was basically, well, it's not really going to affect business as usual. there might be like a few grants cut off here or there, but then there's going to be lawsuits challenging. So it's pretty much uncertain if this is even a risk. But I think that's a very short-sighted approach. I think there are other options that, the government can take to actually force the sanctuary cities to actually disavow that whole philosophy.
What do you think can be done?
I read about Nancy Mace's bill a couple of weeks ago, basically stripping sanctuary cities of the tax-free interest on their bonds. And I think that would be a great idea because this basically takes the ball away from the courts, the government bureaucracies, and basically it puts it back in the hands of the people, the investors. If all of a sudden a sanctuary city like, let's say, San Francisco or whatever, is now all of a sudden going to say, oh my God, our cost of financing has risen by 30 or 40% because investors have to price in that our bonds are not tax exempt anymore in the future. That's going to cost us a lot of money. Not to mention the possibility that if the documentation in that bill would be structured properly, there's a good chance that the municipality, the sanctuary city municipality, their bonds might lose tax exempt status going back from the date of issue.
Oh.
And that's even a worse situation for them. Once they see that, and the market brings them to school and shows them the result. In the case of the declining price of their debt security, they're going to be forced into cooperating with ICE and the federal government.
I'll post for our readers a link to the bill that Ed is referring to, introduced by Representative Nancy Mace, who is a Republican from South Carolina. She represents Charleston, South Carolina, and the southern coast of South Carolina. And we'll put that up there so people can see an example of legislative action that would really force this issue into the financial markets in this way as a risk.
That's very good. I just commenting about that bill. I think it's actually the best way to go about this, rather than let's say go through maybe approach the Office of Credit Ratings at the SEC and all that to somehow resolve this matter from a tax-exempt muni standpoint. I think the way to do this is basically to eliminate the tax exemption of sanctuary city bonds and let the market decide. Then what will happen is the only thing there that has to be done by Nancy Mace is to basically bring it up in front of in the House of Representatives and have it pass. Right now, the Republicans have the majority. You're basically saying to the House of Representatives and the Republicans, look, here's the solution to the sanctuary city dilemma. You got to vote for it. And it'll be the test. That will call out the people who are serious about this or are trying to play politics. I think it's a win politically on both sides from the administration's point of view as far as that goes.
I think it would be very consequential and constructive. I also think that for now, sometimes it takes a long time to get legislation through Congress. Sometimes they have often can't get out of their own way, but it does raise the issue and get people thinking about this problem and other ways. Whether this bill passes or not, the discussion is now out there about whether these jurisdictions should enjoy the kind of blue ribbon bond rating. Is that the term you call it? I can't remember the term for
investment
the top
grade.
of the top.
Investment grade is pretty much the term for everything triple B and above.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll have to watch that. Can you think of any other action that could be taken by the president or by Congress or even a state legislature that would address this issue?
I think the best thing that could happen is for that bill to be passed, and then for the work to be done in committee to keep it as strong as possible. In the meantime, I think, and this is one of the few things that individual investors who invest in municipal bonds can have their own vote. They can basically say, look, hey, Mr. Asset Manager, don't invest in sanctuary cities. I'm signing a document here. I'm instructing you to do that. I don't want any of my assets in sanctuary cities.
That would be powerful. A movement like that among individual investors or, even some institutional investors.
Yeah.
That would get people's attention for sure.
Yeah.
And and be impactful in the markets.
Because because this is literally like a vote, and it's not a vote for somebody doing a campaign promise. This is a vote that has to be adhered to. That'll raise attention in a lot of sanctuary cities and states.
That's for sure.
You asked if there's anything the states could do. Well, I mean, ideally, the states should, it depends how much the states have control over the various cities. Because we know there are some states that are sanctuary states and some cities that aren't cities, sanctuary cities, and vice versa. So that's a little more difficult. I think that's something that could be handled, on the state and city level. But I think the main goal now is to remove the tax exempt status of sanctuary cities at the federal level, because that will preempt court and lawfare action.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ed. This has really been interesting and a new issue that people should be thinking about. And I appreciate your willingness to come on to talk about it and explain it to our listeners. And we'll post some information in the show notes. And we all look forward, I think, to your analysis of this in the form of a guide for investors. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed this very much as well. And just to sum up, I think this is just the beginning. I'm working on new tools and research to help individual investors evaluate sanctuary city risk, political risk, before it's too late. Because I feel like political risk is sort of like bankruptcy. It builds slowly, and then all of a sudden it hits all at once. Or like a repeat of the 2008-2009 credit crunch. All of these things have been going on successfully for 3 or 4 years, 5 years, and then all of a sudden 2007 comes along, kaboom, everything blows up. So I would just say to your listeners, if anyone's interested in learning more about this, you can just contact me, reach out to me directly, email me at info@tempesadvisor.com. And I guess Jessica will give you the details later.
With your permission, we could put that up on our website also.
Okay, great. That sounds fine. I enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed Grebeck, for joining us to talk about the credit risk issue with respect to sanctuaries. Now, one question a lot of people have now on sanctuaries is which jurisdictions in the country exactly are sanctuaries and what is the impact of their policies? The president recently put out another executive order directing DHS and the Department of Justice to create a list of sanctuaries. I hope they'll consult our website for the list that we maintain of sanctuary jurisdictions, most of which has been put together based on ICE records about which law enforcement agencies are not honoring detainers and releasing criminal aliens. And it's also based on some of our own research into the policies. But a lot of people want to know where in the country potentially are we going to see some consequences for these sanctuaries. And people are wondering whether they need to worry about their own community being targeted by these actions. They ought to also be worried about the release of these criminals. So to find out, I submitted a FOIA request to ICE and received tens of thousands of records that I'm just now beginning to analyze. But I have put out a report on my initial findings, which essentially was to let people know which are the most egregious sanctuaries with respect to releasing criminal aliens. I asked for records on declined detainers by jurisdiction going back to FY 2023, and they gave me those records going forward to February of 2025. So it's about 2 years and 4 months of records from ICE. And what I found was pretty interesting. The first thing I was able to calculate is that more than half of all detainers were refused in California by California law enforcement agencies. 52% of all declined detainers happened by California jails releasing criminal aliens out from under ICE, 13,000 times since FY 2023. The other states that have the most declined detainers were Illinois, Virginia, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. The single jail with the most declined detainers was, no surprise, in California, and it was the Santa Clara County Jail in Santa Clara County, California, and that's the county that San Jose is located in. They released almost 3,000 criminal aliens during the period studied. The other top counties were Cook County in Illinois, which does have one of the most egregious sanctuary policies in the country. But surprisingly, the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center in Northern Virginia was just as bad as Cook County. Each of those jails released more than 1,000 criminal aliens since 2023. As far as the types of cases, what I could see in the records was that since 2023, a total of 72 aliens with convictions for homicide were released under these sanctuary policies. I hope you'll check out our website, which has the full report that I've done on my first pass through this information. And I'll be putting out more of the data as soon as I can get through it. I'm interested in looking at all of the municipalities as well as county jails that are sanctuaries and other types of criminals that are being released under these policies. So check our website, cis.org, for more information on that. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and I hope you'll tune in again soon. I'm Jessica Vaughan with the Center for Immigration Studies and Parsing Immigration Policy.